Hello, RTT teachers. I'm very excited to introduce my dear friend, former colleague, and an incredibly passionate teacher, Amal Houck. Hi, Amal, and welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much
Amal,
for having me.
thank you. Amal currently teaches and lives in St. Augustine, Florida. I'm in California. She's on the other end of the coast in Florida. So, two ends of the United States. She and I worked together at the University of California, Riverside many years ago. And before she taught English in Morocco, where she grew up. So before that, English is Amal's third language. She speaks Arabic and French as well. Amal has a master's degree in teaching and learning from the University of Redlands here in California. She has international teaching experience with students of all age groups and from many different countries. More recently, Amal has been teaching all subjects in public schools here in the US, like math, language arts, social studies, sciences, ESL, English, and many more. You'll be surprised to learn that we have to address English language skills in the American school classrooms too. We have students who move here from many different countries with their parents, and their parents could be either immigrants here for better jobs, and lately, because of the way the world is, they could also be refugees. Um, you'll also be surprised to know that these children come at any grade level and they need to be integrated in the mainstream school system with strong English language skills. So, Amal's extensive experience in ELT is a very important aspect, a very important tool in her toolbox of teaching. In the US, for every state, we have a very rigorous and difficult licensing process for teaching in government or public schools, as we call them here. Amal is a licensed public school teacher in 3 states: California, Maryland, and now Florida. That's quite a lot of commitment, discipline, and in depth knowledge. Today, we'll hear from Amal. There is so much we can learn from her long, extensive teaching journey. But for our webinar today, we will focus on learning from her about lesson planning and why it needs a lot of attention and care. So, thank you, Amal. I'm going to unmute you. And thank you for your time, for being here, and we are very excited to hear about your insights. So, let me just begin by asking you how it was when you started thinking of becoming a teacher, and tell us a little bit about your fascinating journey with English growing up.
Well, thank you, Tarana, for this beautiful introduction. I am very happy to be here with all of you guys. Actually, what I want to add, like something that made me think of this. I am myself a second language learner. I am an English learner as I started. When I grew up in Morocco, I spoke French and Arabic, but no English until I went into middle school. And another thing I want to point out is most of my teachers actually were not American or British. They were Moroccans who had learned English themselves as a second language. So the point is, we as teachers of English as a second language do have an impact. Our job is very important. And no matter what we think of ourselves, we actually do help students learn and thrive and become English speakers themselves.
It's amazing.
Yes, everybody does have a big impact on other people's lives on language learning skills. That's something I'm always proud of, and the fact that I actually teach English to American students and even to adult Americans before that, when I was doing orientation workshops, etc., to American students coming to Morocco to teach English. I was teaching them how to teach grammar, how to teach listening, how to teach speak, and because even if they speak English as their first language, it doesn't mean they know how to teach it. So these are all important skills that I want to just to tell everybody in this webinar to be proud of.
Yeah.
is not our first language.
Thank you for that. I think that what we enable as English teachers is the fact that we have a whole new world available to us through English in the form of opportunities for growth for us as teachers professionally, for our students and their future. Imagine a student from Ladakh really using English to get jobs, to get a university degree, to go anywhere in the world to thrive and bring back that experience to their land. So, this is what we have the power of enabling. And thank you for sharing that. So, we will jump right into the 3 questions I have for you about lesson planning. And the first one is, why is lesson planning important? I want to add a little bit to that. We are busy. Many of us teach many subjects. You know that very well in school. You have to juggle between a math class and then maybe a language arts class and maybe a social studies class after. Everything happens in English. The teachers here in Ladakh generally have a similar routine where they're jumping from one class subject to another. But particularly when teaching English, there is a different element of understanding we need to have. We're teaching listening, we're teaching reading, we're teaching these cognitive skills, right? And that's why lesson planning to me is important. So I want to know from you, why is it important in the English language classroom?
It is super important. It's important, like, planning is important in everything in life. If you don't plan, you might get distracted along the way. And the same thing for a lesson. You have a lesson to teach. You want to plan to get an outline first of what you want to teach. It helps you be organized, have a clear idea of what you want to target in that lesson, and focus on what the goal from that lesson is going to be for your students. Without that planning, you will get, because it's so big, it's so vast and diversified, you will get distracted with one thing or another. And if you deviate from the path you have assigned for yourself, then you will end up at the end of the lesson, be like, whoops, well, we did have a very interesting discussion, but that was not the intent of today's lesson. So in order to avoid that, lesson planning becomes crucial before you start your lesson. It helps you also as a teacher to be focused, to know how to bring back your students together and to frame them into that path that you want for them in order for you to let them or lead them towards that goal that you have for them for that lesson. So it's very important.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the top few things I heard were keeping the focus so that you don't get distracted. And there is so much pressure to finish the curriculum in that certain amount of time. So this is important. Not only planning today's lesson, but also looking out what's coming up next week, what's coming up next month, and so on. Right. And the other one you said that I really think is extremely important is to avoid distractions within that lesson in the classroom. While there is room for students to emerge, go
I
on.
was going to add to that. That doesn't mean that lesson planning is rigid and
Yeah,
no matter
exactly.
it helps you having like a frame yourself. You know where you're going. It's almost like a track for training.
Yeah, a roadmap.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the when you are a skilled teacher, that's when it comes your flexibility with your lesson plan, because with experience, you'll notice that you plan something and you're so excited about this activity that you think is going to blow the roof with your students. And sometimes you even do it with one group and it goes really well. And then the second group comes in of students and you're like, I'm doing
What?
the same activity. Why is this not having the same response? Not working, the students are not connecting, there's no engagement. That's when you start bringing your expertise and your knowledge and try to modify things in the midst of it and try to bring students in so you don't lose them.
Yes, yes.
Still planned, you still know what your objective is. You still know where you want to take these students, what skill you want to teach. So you're pre-planned, whether the activity works or not. You still have an idea about what you want to teach that day and what your goal is. And
Yes, goals is the key word. And having that clarity can change everything, right? Can make the whole process easy on you as a teacher, but also to keep the students focused. Amal, can you come closer to the screen for sound, better sound?
okay,
Yeah,
better
thank
this
you.
way.
Much better. So the second question then is, how does ESL planning, lesson planning, look like for an English language classroom? What must you be really careful about?
Yeah. Well, there are, to me, I mean, they can be more or they can be elaborated on, but to me, there's like 5 important steps for a good, successful lesson plan. The first and foremost is the objective. You set your objective for the lesson. And when I say objective, it doesn't have, I mean, there is the big idea, the big objective for the unit, but a lesson has to have a very specific, narrow objective that you want for that, for students to learn in that lesson.
Mm.
So a lesson is 45 minutes, for example. Well, within this 45 minutes, what do I want my students to learn? What skill am I focused on? Yeah, I don't, and it has to be very specific, very limited, and very narrow, and it has to be limited to one skill at a time. I cannot be like
Yeah.
scattered and teaching many skills at a time because that's when I'm going to lose focus and be distracted.
Mm.
So one objective, a small one, and just that's the target of the lesson.
Mm.
And once I have that, I know that's what I call the I can statement. So I'm going to tell myself, today I want my students to learn this. At the end of this lesson, they should be able to do this. So my students should say, today I can use the simple present using pronouns he and she.
Mm. So specific. Can you repeat that one again?
As an
I
example,
can. Mm-hmm.
target or objective of the lesson is the I can statement.
Mm.
It has to be very specific and focus on one skill at a time. So like today's lesson, I have a 45 lesson I'm going to be teaching. What am I going to target? Well, I talk to my students and I start my lesson by explaining to them, today we are focusing on this. I want you to learn how to use a simple present using two pronouns, he and she. And I'm going to write it big on my screen or my board. And I'm going to say, I can, and I make students tell me what they can do today. Today, I can use simple present with two pronouns, we and she.
Mm. Mm.
So we're focusing on I eat, you eat, but he eats, she eats. I'm adding that S to different verbs. And once I have that in my head, then I'm going to plan my lesson based on that. That's all I want students to learn. I don't want them to talk about different things. I don't want them to deviate from it. So whatever we're going to do, I will try to make it engaging, but that's my focus.
Yeah.
Once that's done, I move on to the second step, which is, okay, in order for my students to learn this, are there any prerequisites or anything they need to know first before I can teach this? So I know
So
I'm going to,
crucial.
yes. So here I can work on vocabulary. When I teach this, I'm going to be using the word pronoun, subject pronouns. I'm going to be using verbs. These two words. Well, do my students know what pronoun is, what a subject pronoun is? Maybe I should do a warm up or a little introduction about subject pronouns, and I can just lay them out like you, he, she, it, and they're going to be like, oh, this okay. We call this subject pronouns. Let's make sure everybody knows and sees them. I always provide visuals. It's always better for language learners. And once that's done, I also need the word verb. Do they know what a verb is? A verb is an action. Can you give me examples? I engage students. Give me examples of some verbs. Eat, drink, go. Okay, these are actions. How about sleep? Is sleep an action? Oh, but sleep, you're sleeping, you're not moving. Yeah, but it's an action, something you're doing. So there are abstract verbs too. Let's give some other examples of some other verbs like think or not sit, etc. And so once they know this, now I know my lesson is not going to be unsuccessful, because when I'm going to be explaining about which subject pronoun to use and what happens to the verb when I use it in simple present, they know what I'm talking about.
Yes, absolutely. I think these are really important tips. And I wanted to add a little more dimension to this for our teachers in their context, which is when Amal said, be sure of the skill, and Amal, please add to it as you see fit. We're not saying you only teach one skill in the class at a time, because we do integrated skills teaching. However, have your learning outcome or goal defined for each skill that you're using today, right?
What I think. Maybe we should
Exactly. Yeah.
skill to whatever target you're going to.
Specific. Yeah. The top level target you have today, the main target. Yeah. Yeah. So these are really important tips. And what I really find valuable in what you said was that you need to make sure what the prerequisites are before you set your goals. So that if you forgot whether you did verbs with them or the basic articles usage or whatever it is in a grammar class, or how to write a sentence in your own words in a writing exercise, make sure that, or like a summary, make sure that you have taught the basics of it before and review it so the warmer could be a review of a previous lesson to transition into the new lesson, right?
And then number 3, lesson plan after this would be, how am I going to engage my students in order to teach them this? So student engagement based on their age category, based on their interests, based on their cultural background, on what motivates them. So knowing my students is actually a key here for me to come up with the right activities and practices and exercises for them to do in order to get their attention and actually engage them in these activities. At first, when we are new or we just start the year with our groups, this becomes it's kind of hard to know, like, well, I don't know my students yet, but it does come very quickly, because the beginning of the year is usually these, icebreakers. That's how you get to know your students.
Yeah, yeah.
Where you get to know their personalities, their interests, what they like, what they don't. And from there, it gives you an idea about, okay, I know what they like. I know they like games, or I know they like to work in small groups, and I know they like to, this group likes to talk, this group doesn't like to talk, they prefer to draw, etc. So I'm going to use whatever things they write to incorporate them into my activities that target that skill, actually.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I think this is something I encourage all teachers trying out a new way of teaching in their classrooms to explore. This is like an advanced, a little more skilled way of understanding your students' choices and preferences. Once you start planning your lessons systematically, you'll start seeing what your students like or dislike in the way of how they produce the output. Right? Like Amal said, some love to draw, give them a drawing bit. You can make groups based on that, the quiet students, the louder ones, or mixed. So there are so many creative ways in which you can engage. And I think that's a skill in itself that we develop.
So while planning your lesson, always keep in mind your audience. Who are you?
Yes. Yes.
And that's like for everything else. Like once you know your students, your plan of your lesson is going to be, incorporate a lot of the things, they like in it.
Thank you. I think that is so relevant here, because we in the school system often forget, we club them. Oh, these are my 6th graders or my 7th graders, right? We see them as a collective. We see them as a group moving from one grade or standard to another. Yeah, but they're individuals and they have individual ways of learning. And we've talked about that in some of our training sessions. But to pay attention to that and bring that back into the goals of your lesson plan and how you plan group activities is such an art. That's where your lesson planning becomes an art. Yeah. So thank you, Amal, for bringing all these very valuable insights.
And once that's done, you have to think ahead of time before even teaching the lessons of, well, what kind of misconceptions might have happened or challenges that could have happened.
Wow. Yes. Yes.
Think about like what kind of, what if somebody completely misunderstands this and think of it as this, or
Mm.
challenge or difficulty they might put, because sometimes when we're making something, creating something, it's clear in our mind. We know exactly what we're talking about. And we create it, like we simplify it and make it as easy as it could be. But then you never know that actually somebody will see it from a completely different angle and come up with something completely different. So try to put yourself in different shoes and try to find out what kind of misconceptions they can come up with this.
Yeah.
Going to misunderstand the S that I put for verbs for after she and he and confuse that with the S for plural. And how am I going to bring that up in my lesson and actually come up with maybe with an activities where there are mistakes and have them find the mistakes? Is this the S for plural or is this the S for the third person singular in simple present?
Yes.
And so just think ahead of time of those misconceptions. Those misconceptions can be also found. You can learn from your own students. So once
Mm.
lesson, you'll find out some misconceptions you didn't even think of, and you're like, "Whoa, did not see this coming." So how can you take that and incorporate that into your warm up next?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Not the same lesson, but incorporate it in your warm up so that you can bring that up and make sure they understand that, oh, there is a way to misunderstand this. So let's make sure I don't fall into that trap.
Mm. This is so important. What are some points in the lesson where you can listen for misconceptions? Would that be at the end of a preview? Would that be in the middle of a what, according to you? Where should you
So
do the checks?
it starts right after the what we call the I do. So as soon as
Mm.
you finish your start like a very short time of you giving the lecture or giving the lesson, once you start giving assigning activities to groups or to the class or to individuals, that's when
Mm.
you start collecting
Mm.
who is getting it, who's not, what kind of misconceptions they're coming up with.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't even ask you, right? You have to keep observing. Students are not really thinking about asking questions at that level. So, this is again a very important insight. And I think that if there are 4 or 5 things you want to really look out for, it is really this: the I can statements, the how my students work, who has a certain pattern of working, who's quiet, who's loud, who prefers visuals, who can just remember by listening, things like that, and the misconceptions. Any other final comments?
Before you end your lesson, you have to come up with some way of assessing your students'
Mm-hmm. That's the final. Yes, yes.
performance or their feedback with you, but you want to have some type of feedback from them, see how much they have learned, who got it, who didn't. And you can do that through what we call exit tickets. It can
Yes.
be a small quiz, it can be a fun activity you give them, but something that you can collect and take with you and look at and find out, all right, who's got it, who's still making misconceptions, who's coming up with new misconceptions, or who doesn't understand at all and completely needs a reteach with me and sit down with me in small groups and learn this better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is, I love the things you mentioned, like an exit ticket. Can you tell us more about what an exit ticket looks like?
Ticket could be literally a sticky note you give each kid, and you tell them, okay, write me a sentence about like convert this I eat every day to sheep. And
Mm.
so it depends on what your lesson is. It can be something you pre-typed before, maybe with blanks. It can be, it should be small,
Yeah.
but reading that if your lesson is 45 minutes, you have to allow yourself some time at the end, and it cannot be like it's not a test. It's just a very small moment for the student individually to give you what they learned. if you
I
have.
love that. I'm going to make a visual for the teachers also to see as an example. And then we know quizzes, we know a fun activity where they can go and write it on the poster, on the board, run to the board, race to the board. Yeah.
Corners. The only thing with games and stuff, just be careful with if you want individual feedback, students will be following each other.
Yes.
Here be going with their peers, so you don't know if they really just went there and got the right answer because they followed the one who usually gets the right answer, or if they get it. So
Yeah.
that's being private and sitting down and doing it on your own. So
Yes. I love the exit ticket. Yeah, yeah. I think that's that's a quick, easy, and
yeah,
profound way, a solid way of knowing what they learned. Like you gave the example, convert the I to she to test for verb changes, right? Like what verb conjugations have they learned? So thank you. Wow, these were some precious golden tips. And we are so grateful to you for coming online. It would be 2 a.m. for you or 3 a.m. when we do the live webinar. So I'm glad we could record this.
thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure seeing your beautiful face and
Likewise.
with everybody.
And I've always admired your energy and your zest in the classroom. So this is so precious for us to do for an audience that's far away in the mountains of Ladakh. Right? Yeah. So thank you so much.